am Anna O'Sullivan, the director of Butler Gallery and the curator of the exhibition Cities of the World, featuring the work of Cathy Prendergast and Chris Leach on either side of me here. The exhibition is presented in association with the Kilkenny Arts Festival. So today may I extend a thanks to the team here at Parade Tower in Kilkenny Castle for hosting us here today, and all the volunteers that are involved in the festival that are helping out here today. I hope most of you today maybe have had the chance to view the exhibition already. As anyone who was also at the opening and heard my few opening words, this exhibition, Cities of the World, came about through serendipity and goodwill. I was visiting the artist Leanna Lang in March of 2024 at the Whitaker Museum in Roslindale, north of Manchester, to see her solo show there and firm up an exhibition that featured in the Butler Gallery last August. And I was kindly picked up by the artist Chris Leach here, husband of Gaynor Seville, the director of the museum, to transport me to Rosendale. And we got talking about his practice as you do, and his capital cities body of work, which I was intrigued by. And we arranged for me to see them before I returned to Ireland. I was immediately delighted by the work, and of course I couldn't help but think of my old pal and college mate, Cathy Prendergast, iconic city drawings, and how their pairing might work beautifully together. So that was the serendipity element. The goodwill element is for the Irish Museum of Modern Art, IMA, for allowing us to borrow Cathy's full suite of city drawings, which are in their permanent collection. They've not been exhibited in their entirety in many years, so it is truly a great honour for us to exhibit them in full. I'm really delighted that both of the artists are happy with the juxtaposition of their work, and also from the response the work is receiving from the public, who are enjoying the experience of seeing this work displayed in the gallery and also picking up on the synergies created. The team at the Butler Gallery were really lucky enough to enjoy a walk through the exhibition with Cathy and Chris on Friday, and there were so many connections discovered by both of them besides the obvious. They both shared that the making of their different series was reflective of a specific moment in time. Cathy's earlier use of maps involved grafting imaginary locations onto images, often of the female body, where the intention was for the viewer to read the body as landscape. She then wanted to work on a sustained long-term project as opposed to the piece-by-piece basis of her earlier work, hence the evolution of city drawings, which Cathy began in 1990 while walking the streets of Clerkenwell in London, where she was living. It was a time of world political instability. Nations and cities in the form of Soviet Union or Yugoslavia, for instance, had come into being, and others had disappeared. Chris began his series in 2012 while he lived in Mayo in Ireland. He lived here from 2006 to 2018. So we'll get to Chris's evolutions via some of the questions. He had earlier been struck by a miniature work he had made of the World Trade Center, which sparked a commitment to this larger body of work. So there was over 20 years apart in the commencement of these different bodies of work, through both, though both used traditional materials in their making. The mapping idea that Cathy's images embrace are drawn from analog maps and were drawn from the centre of each page with the city on a north-south axis with a 2B pencil. Because the immense disparities in scale between cities are impossible to represent in such a compressed form, Cathy worked intuitively, following her own sense of scale. Chris, on the other hand, incorporates images from the internet. His meticulously crafted miniature drawings are solidly three-dimensional, drawn with 4 and 5H pencil, scalpel and burnishing tools on the gessoed face of an oak block. Both are interested in how scale can be used as a tool for both psychological and representational investigation. Just before we begin posing questions to the artists, may I take a few moments to share short biographical information on our panel. Cathy Prendergast is a London-based Irish artist. She studied at the National College of Art and Design, Dublin, and the Royal College of Art in London. Her work encompasses installation, sculpture, and drawing, and incorporates a variety of materials, including wool, fabric, human hair, and found objects. Her drawing and sculptural works consider issues of sexuality, identity, mapping, and power. In 1992, she started the City Drawing Project, which she exhibited at Tate Britain, IMA, and the Venice Biennale in 1995, for which she won the Best Young Artist Award, very prestigious at the time. Owned by IMA, the City drawings have not been seen exhibited in their entirety in many years. Cathy is exhibited widely and work is represented in public collections both here and abroad, and she's represented by the Butler Gallery in Dublin. Chris Leach was born in England and is a graduate of Wimbledon School of Art, London. Chris has said of his work, "The mainstay of my work is a small scale and miniature, utilising various media with a focus on drawing and recently gouache. I'm interested in how scale can be used as a tool for both psychological and representational investigation. My work considers notions of value, ideas surrounding infrastructure and proximity. It seeks to interrogate the idea of representational and physical space within particular contexts, be they political, social, or environmental. The mainstay of the work utilises archival materials and procedures that have their roots in the history and conservation of art. The works are usually intricate and finely detailed. They are about proximities and relativities on both a psychological and material level. They are constructed to encourage an intimate response, enticing the viewer towards the surface of the composition as a point of mediation between the image and the elements that make up the work." Dr. Yvonne Scott, at the end here, is an Emeritus Fellow and former Associate Professor of History of Art in Trinity College, Dublin. She was awarded the RHA Gold Medal for 2025 in recognition of her services to Irish art. She has researched and published extensively in modern and contemporary art, including analysis of various aspects of the work of artist Cathy Prendergast. Her most recent book is Landscape and Environment in Contemporary Irish Art, published by Churchill House Press in association with the Irish Museum of Modern Art in 2023. Thanks for bearing with me. That's a long old intro. Anyway, perhaps we can start with you, Chris. And you previously shared that you used to be a printer and worked with a microscope, but that you did not use one in the making of this work. Can you tell us more about the process of realising these miniature drawings?
Well, obviously, they're not quick to do. So the main thing is the sort of time element, I guess, because obviously this project took quite a while to produce. There's never been seen. So it's making its debut here, for which I'm very thankful to Anna and Cathy and everyone at the Butler Gallery. So I'd just like to say that the outcome. But yeah, I've been using miniatures for a while now. It's probably getting on for 20 years. And I think just because they do something very specific and very particular psychologically is why I've kind of kept at it. There's that issue, and also the sort of, the idea of value and scale and making something miniature, obviously in an art context is a bit of a perversity. A lot of art is grandiose and about pomp and bombast and about, prestige and those kind of issues. But I kind of just, I guess, I've always kind of recoiled from that in some way. And I quite like the insularity of actually making that work and the sort of intimacy of making that work. And I think, obviously it's a little bit peculiar. Sometimes it makes me laugh. Sometimes it's absolutely completely draining, because obviously, if you're working on miniatures for hours on end, sometimes I do like 12 or 14 hour stints to produce that work. It's a big ask. And you can't continually do that. So you have to take a break, you have to get away from it, maybe, go for a walk, have a cup of tea, whatever it is. And at some points I was also losing dexterity in my fingers. So there were some points during the course of making this project that I sort of thought I would never complete it.
10 years, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, 10 years.
yeah.
And you had an
Eventually, I didn't
accident
expect
in
it
the
to
middle
take
of it.
that long.
You had an accident in the middle of it that affected your arm.
The sort of genesis of the project came out of a road traffic accident in 2011 that I had, and I was due to have a solo show at Ballinarring, County Mayo, and that had to be postponed because my drawing arm basically had 5 operations on it, and it's got a femur plate, bone stint, bone graft, pins and wires, and it failed 3 times, I think. So basically, we got a surgeon in from Dublin who threw the book at it. So obviously, I was a bit apprehensive about whether or not I would be able to make work again. I was already making miniatures. Came out of the operation. The surgeon said, "You should be able to draw again, but you may get arthritis over the next few years." So my ridiculous idea at the time was, right, I need to do something whilst I can. And I'd already done a series of works based on the prime meridian and the equator. There was a series of 14 works which were to be shown at Butler Arts Centre, and they kind of worked really well, I thought, as you know, in the exhibition space. So I thought, well, I'll continue working down those lines, but I obviously need to do something with a bit of an impact. Kind of thinking, oh yeah, I'll do it every capital city in the world. That won't take too long. And it took an awful lot longer than I anticipated, and I never thought I would finish it at some points, but here we are.
Maybe I can turn to yourself, Yvonne, to pose a question for Kathy. We're going to just bounce back and forth with a few questions and hopefully have some time at the end for some questions from the audience.
Well, just something I wanted to say.
Microphone.
Sorry, can you hear me okay? Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to congratulate Anna, first of all, because I think it's just remarkable, to see the work of these 2 artists together, and that they're actually dealing with effectively the same subject, but they're so completely different in their particular approach. Yet there are really fascinating elements of comparison between them. But to kind of find a point of connection, of tangent between the 2 artists when their broader practice is very, very different from each other. But yet at this particular point, they are addressing the same subject. And I thought it was a brilliant idea to bring them together and to explore them. So my question to Kathy was, given that we're so familiar with work that is about the body or about very personal things, on the face of it, to address capital cities might seem like a very different kind of thing. So can you enlarge on that a little bit?
Yes. When I started this project, I was looking at a way of making drawings that maybe would look like a portrait. So in a way, for me, it was still thinking of the city as a kind of microcosm that maybe could relate to the brain or a reflection of our thoughts on a place. So what really sparked this project for me, apart from walking in cities, which I love to do, and my sister's a town planner, so often on my walks with her, she'd be talking about, these roads go like this because it's based on the way a village is planned rather than a city and stuff like that. I had seen a drawing in Cardiff in kind of the late 80s. I had a solo exhibition there, and in their museum collection or a different group show, like in Anna's gallery where there's other work, which it's always inspiring to see. There was a little tiny pencil drawing by a German artist called Walls, and he drew a tiny pencil drawing of a skull. He does quite dense drawings, but this was just a few lines, and it just looked like an arterial road to me, and it just lodged in my head. And then further down the line, a few different ideas, what was happening in the world. I have Radio 4 on all the time in the studio. The news was all about what was the instability in the world. Just things came together.
It's really kind of fascinating to see the evolution of it. And I remember at one stage we were having a discussion about the source material for these works, that they were maps when you could get your hands on them. So some would be more easy to get and others virtually impossible.
Yes, that's very true. If you've seen the exhibition or are going to it, you'll notice there's 113 drawings in my project, and there's 197 in Chris's. I couldn't get a map of every capital city in the world because some had just become to have that status, and their maps just weren't available. A map has a shelf life of 25 years. After that, it goes out of credibility. So I bought as many as I could in the local shop, Stanford's. Then I bought some in Paris. And then I started to go to libraries, reference libraries, and then I had to like photocopy, you know, like the A to Z one. So each map, you know, I had to have a different approach. I remember I photocopied sheets and sheets of Tehran in Camden Reference Library, and it's a huge city. So like my photocopied pages were probably about 6-7 foot up on the wall. So I had to approach that drawing in a very different way to other ones.
I think this is fascinating, really, that getting the source material or the ideas or developing the ideas, which is all part of the completed work, is part of what takes time. And Chris, I'm just fascinated with your 190 something images, 196 images. Even though it sounds easy to get it all from the internet, it probably isn't at all to find them all. We'll have to establish which cities they are, first of all, and then find the images to work from.
Obviously, bear in mind, it was started in, I put together the images for this work in 2014, so even like Google was slightly different at that point in time and wasn't always correct, because as I was working, I would be doing a little bit of research into different locations, and you know that would be possibly quite a cursory process, but you know, just to sort of, for my own knowledge, try and learn about places that I'd never heard about before. You know, I don't think you know, sort of the majority of people would have a knowledge of every single capital city in the world, or even every single country. You know, and I think, I can't remember which one it was, but there was one that I remember kind of getting part way through, and I'd been doing some reading, thinking, I'm sure this is totally the wrong location. So obviously I'd spent a few days doing this drawing and thought, no, it's definitely the wrong location. So yeah, in general, it was a relatively straightforward process, because obviously kind of part and parcel of the kind of ideas behind it is, I guess, to do with surveillance. Like the internet is obviously the World Wide Web. And as much as we're able to sort of utilise and facilitate the aspects of that, it also looks back at us. So I think with maps themselves as well, and you know, the whole idea of utilising an analogue process, you know, they're all to do with power in some ways. So I kind of think, you know, that was, I mean, certainly sort of choosing the images, I did want a specific kind of viewpoint. I wanted an aerial view. I wanted them to be overlooking the city, just because for the viewer, engaging with that, there's a very particular sort of psychological process to do with expansiveness and distance, and just that idea of proximity and distance, and kind of, you know, you as a viewer being in front of this thing which represents that other thing which is out there somewhere. I love the kind of complexity of that relationship, but yeah, so...
There was a democratization among all the cities of the world recorded. I think one of you said people hold these places close to their heart. And interestingly, in our chat, you both felt quite emotional overlap and connection with revisiting this body of work. Can you both elaborate on that response that you had when you both saw the two together?
I found it really absolutely fantastic to be showing with Chris. I think the installation is really unique, and it made me really think about my project from looking at his project. So that was really good. It sparked new ideas for me. It kind of made me question the whole idea about doing a long project, which I'd never really thought about before. It just seemed a natural thing to do at the time. So it's very nice to meet someone who had also done something similar. And, you know, I think both our works are about humanity, really. And I think it kind of speaks of that more powerfully through both our work being together.
Yeah. I love, there was a school group, I'd gone into the gallery the other day and there was a school group just coming in, and they were all sort of 10, 11 years old. So I did a bit of an impromptu talk with them because I used to be a youth worker a while ago, but it was dead lovely. And I was, you know, explaining them how long it took. I was like, well, you know, what year were you guys born? They're like, oh, 2014. So I was like, well, this has taken this long to produce. And like, so, and then, you know, just the idea of, I spoke to them, the idea of size, and I was saying, you know, this is every country in the world, but they're all the same size. And that's really important. No country is more important than any other. And so, I mean, it was, you know, it's quite a simple idea in ways, but you could see them going, oh, and that for me was like dead important. It was just like, yeah, hopefully, you know, even just for that, it's worth doing.
I suppose you both, interestingly, you both studied sculpture. And these days, artists are wholly comfortable working in many mediums. Kathy, is your drawing practice like kind of using another muscle, or is it intrinsically part of the art-making process for you?
It is intrinsically part of the art-making process, though I do find it's my challenge in how, well, I do think about 2D and 3D and how they can overlap. When I was in college, every sculpture I made, I seemed to draw on. It seemed to need that skin somehow. And more recently, I've been using two-dimensional pieces, also maps, but in a way using them that they have an organic energy to them, and then trying to connect them with three-dimensional work. So they're more like, I would say, a tableau where elements of it are two-dimensional. Anyway, still my big problem, how to make these things work.
And you're primarily a 2D yourself, is it? Or they're almost little sculptures themselves.
I don't count them as two-dimensional. They're sort of objects, and you know, they were sort of produced in that way. And obviously the way that it's displayed, you know, on the little white blocks sat off the wall. So, you know, it's essentially a plinth. So I think all of my work has always tried to, in some way, kind of embody materials, and you know, sort of the primacy of material and making, and just sort of the depth of those things. But yeah, I mean, I don't particularly, I never count them as two-dimensional. I don't particularly count myself as a painter or a drawer. It's just, you know, you're trying to sort of utilise kind of space and environment and psychology, and all of those things go into making a piece of artwork, which may or may not be one thing or another. So I quite like that they don't really sit within the boundary of one thing or another.
I think that's an interesting aspect because, they are these three-dimensional objects. Sorry, can you hear me? Sorry, beg your pardon, thank you. They are these three-dimensional objects, and yet within each drawing, and I suppose this is one of the interesting things when both of you are working with drawing, then tone becomes really important, and, whether it's dark or light, and, the kind of shades of the pencil or the burin or whatever implement you're using. But there's that there's that element of illusionism that you think you're looking into space, as you look at each little image, and yet, of course, it's a flat surface. So this kind of play between the dimensions is to do with the object, but it's also to do with what you represent on the object as well.
I think both myself and Kathy were talking about the kind of primacy of drawing.
Yeah.
Like what we're not doing either of us is reproducing something in any sense photographic. Where, my talent things are sort of modulations in that very particular space, and if you sort of obviously you have to look closely, but if you look closer, and I've used scalpel as well, so like the surface is lacerated. A lot of the white information on my work is basically kind of like drawn back through the pencil with a scalpel. So, I've not used a white chalk or a white pencil or anything like that. It's all scalpel, pencil and burnishing tool. But just kind of revisited and reworked into on each spot over over a long time.
Sorry,
Yvonne. I also think of when I've seen my city drawings up, although they're drawings, I've also thought of them as an installation. And I don't know if you think the same about your project, but when you go into the gallery in the Butler, the first thing you notice is the placing of the work, and you look at it as a whole first, and then hone in on all the detail. So I thought it was really interesting that Chris also has done a lot of installation work. So I think both of us probably think of space as a big thing. A big thing for me is when I make work is how it looks in the space is a really, really important part of it. And, it's funny that in both our projects, we're dealing with space in the miniature and then space in the project as a whole as well.
I think the way that it's obviously put together at Butler is beautifully well done. And I love the kind of echoes and the sort of synchronicities between obviously the two pieces of work, but also, kind of like essentially in a gallery space, you're dealing with the white space, which obviously is a raft of discourse about that, about politics of it, about the status of that white space. So I think any work that sits within the context of that will immediately have some kind of dialogue to do with those things. So, if you put art in a particular space, in a gallery space, then, there's a sort of layered sort of sequence of meanings and associations which you can sort of, obviously pick out, but essentially it has to function within that and have life and breathe and, use some value.
Yeah, going in to see the show today, really struck by how brilliantly well it is presented as well. And the idea that you've two artworks in that space made up of over 300 objects. Mm-hmm. And the two artworks sort of face each other in a line all around. I think it's just so cleverly presented.
It was an enormous challenge because when I first counted, I went through the details of the dimensions of the space. I thought, how in God's name are we going to fit all this in? So went through a couple of scenarios with a guy who has a software program, and we had to measure it so precisely so that, we could figure out how much space we were going to leave between each work so that it would fit. And the best case scenario was putting the three movable walls together, and that, of course, both artists wanted it in a consecutive line, and that was the way they should be seen. But while we thought, on paper, this is the way it's going to look, But then in reality, it had so much resonance then. It was lovely the way it's the work just sings. Okay, it's just a placement, but it did make a difference, and thankfully we had the space to be able to show it in that way. Yeah.
It looks so obvious and so simple. It looks as if that's how it should be.
I have two great technicians who are really precise and just got off on the detail of it. So it took a while, but it was really great. Yeah. I think one thing that Kathy, you were saying earlier about listening to BBC4 in the background, picking up the myriad of issues of our time, and I wondered if you still do that, but I believe you said your work is non-political, and not sure if that's really the case or not. But also with Chris, you kindly brought over a big bag of books that were impactful or touchstones for you in your practice over the years, and they included many fascinating areas of exploration. Just to bear with me 1 minute, they're such as the Poetics of Space by Gaston Bachelard, Class Warfare by Noam Chomsky, Landscape and Power by W.J.T. Mitchell, Imagined Communities by Benedict Anderson, The City Shaped, Urban Patterns and Meanings of History by Spyro Kostov, and my personal favourite, Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino. Can you tell me if that reading informed how you approach the work a lot, or is that just, again, absorbing, like Kathy listening to the radio, and politics in any way venturing into the work?
I think that was more as a process for myself of kind of learning about the issues that seemed to be building up once I'd started the work, rather than something which informed it at the outset. So those things were kind of acquired during the course of that process. That would be interesting in relation to this, and and I haven't read everything. Some of them, I've had a look at in more depth, but I don't. I mean, what I was trying to find was, I guess, in those books, some kind of ideas that kind of helped me inform what I was doing, to sort of try and locate this sort of daft idea and kind of see if it was actually worth continuing with, because there were plenty of times during that 10 years where I kind of thought, is it actually worth doing? And I just leave it, whatever, just leave it unfinished. So I guess it's just I've had a lot of support from people about my work, and I always feel that has always been integral to it, as an artist, just to kind of keep going and continue, and not kind of get disheartened with what you're doing. And I can't begin to say how pleased I am with how everything has turned out. It's just absolutely brilliant.
Well, you're going to get some nice install shots out of it too. So
yeah, absolutely.
Let's hope some institution or big collector might commit to it at the end of the day, because it really needs to be seen by the public. It'd be fabulous if Emma went for it as well. So they had these two bodies together, but can't imagine they will. Did you have something?
I have so many questions, but one of the things that I wanted to just ask Kathy about was with that, with this series and with other works you've done that are based on cartography, how the text relates to the work. Because obviously these are all maps, or based on maps, but they've got this organic quality and they don't have any identifying text. And then other works that you have done have used text selectively or obliterated it, or in some way. So could you just talk about that aspect?
Like every map has a text on it, and I use maps in various ways quite a bit. The very, very first piece I made when I was in college was a figure on a bed made out of plaster, a life cast, and I painted it like a ordnance survey map, an Irish ordnance survey map, so which are the most beautiful maps, I think. They don't use them anymore, but the ones that went from very dark brown down to the greens and blue, and it was called Seabed. So it was basically an island of a female figure on a mattress, which was painted like the sea. And this, I suppose, was the start of my thinking of landscape and the female form, because the year before, in my second year in art college, I couldn't make anything. I just hit a wall, and I had a really brilliant tutor who just said, don't worry about it, doesn't matter. Everyone can make work sometimes, but you have to keep thinking and reading, and something will click at some point. And it doesn't matter if you're literally at the end of your third year and that happens, just keep thinking. So I was reading just all Irish poets. I just thought, well, I'll just keep reading. They were bite-sized, wasn't heavy theory or anything. But I noticed every line I liked, I just wrote in my notebook. And most of them ended up being something to do with the landscape, but they all had to do with somebody generally talking to someone else. They were very intimate, connections with people or the land. So in the end, I had a whole notebook of loads of different people's poetry. And then when I made this figure and I had all the main red roads and the minor roads, which were, red and white, I just wrote my whole notebook of poetry all over them. So there was probably about 15 different poets' works plagiarized and melded with other other poets' work. But you would only maybe be able to read snatches of bits at a time. So that was me putting not my own text, but other people's text on. The maps I'm using at the moment that I'm painting over have text already on them. And, I've been going, should I white them all out? Is it a problem that you can see where the actual place is? So I actually just leave the text on, but you can never read all of it because I use some translucent paint, some opaque paint. So that also becomes snatches of words, and also not all the text is in English anyway. So, yeah.
I thought it was interesting that the city maps, one might recognise them by their shape, but obviously they're not, none of the street names are there, nothing.
Yes, it's probably too small anyway, but the ones that have rivers would be identifiable by their river. I think that would be the thing. And they were about anonymity in a way. The city drawings are about equality, democracy, maybe anonymity. That
sort of aspect. I was really interested also in the idea of scale. And I know what you were saying, that Chris produced his works without using any kind of visual aid, if you like. But I have to say, when I went in there this morning, I had the little gadget so I could see some of the works more clearly. It's just remarkable. But something that struck me as really interesting was where all of the images are, for both of the artists, are capital cities, and yet the actual artworks are really, really intimate. So this aspect of scale comes very powerfully to the fore in them, that I'm kind of thinking of that kind of exquisite preciousness that we maybe haven't really seen since the time of Jan van Eyck, and those really exquisite paintings that were done, in the 15th, 14th centuries. So to see something like that, which is about sometimes a great, powerful city, powerful in the sort of the global, the political sense, but yet is full of people who have their own human lives, and that element of intimacy is there. I thought this was a really interesting thing that your works triggered. So was this something that was in your mind when you're making the works, the distinction between power structures and how tiny those pieces were?
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously what I was absolutely trying to do with my own work was that whole sort of like democratization and trying to ensure there's a dialogue throughout the whole of the, the sort of series, but it's one piece of work, that there's no hierarchy in between each particular work. But then, kind of like trying to attain that and ensure that each one, you don't really, I mean, I'm happy enough that there's a consistency throughout the thing so that, you don't look at any of those locations and think, oh, that particular drawing is a different quality to another one. There's a consistency throughout whereby I kind of think what I've managed to do is keep 196 drawings and have them almost like completely on a parity, on a level. And from an artistic point of view, that does something very specific. But I think from a cultural point of view, just to say somewhere like, I don't know, like anywhere that you probably haven't heard of is equal and relative in status to like Washington and Moscow and Tokyo, I think is hopefully, and I've obviously just sort of had them in a box for a couple of years, so them being out in the world, it's kind of interesting to see what other people take from it, but that is one of the main intentions of producing the work in the way that I produced it, in that there's a parity between things and a democracy of scale.
I think it had to be capital cities to have a consistency throughout the whole project, and not every capital city is the most recognisable in a country. Like, I remember doing Washington and thinking, but everyone absolutely knows what New York looks like, but not Washington, and say Nigeria has Abuja rather than Lagos. So it then became, these seats of administration or power, but they're not necessarily the real recognisable face of a country. But I think it had to be capitals, because in a way that's the hierarchy of how we live, that it's the capital and then works down. So, yeah.
I thought that was interesting. I found that with some of the cities, when I recognised the names of them, like Washington, but there were others then that I have to admit, in my ignorance, I hadn't heard of.
Me neither.
Like Yarran, for example, and I was like, really, where is that? And what's its population? And found its current population is less, sorry, can you hear me, is less than 1,000. And I mean, one of the really interesting things I think with these as contemporary works is that they embody the contradictions that we experience, such as the desire to make things equivalent, and yet, even when you put them on the same size, Washington might carry more clout in the wider world. Well, I certainly agree with you. The concept that they are, one country is as important as another. But then when you see a little tiny one, which one has never heard of, that it's a challenge then to create equivalence between them at times.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. It is, but also I think it's really good to look at them and think these small places are as important to, the people who live there, and
I think that the show in general can be a bit of a challenge for the viewer, because, well, on the one hand, with your work, Kathy, we had to have low looks, so it makes it even more difficult. And Chris, you had not wanted us to provide magnifying glass, which was absolutely absolutely fine. There's a few people we've had to give in to, but the reason being is that you wanted to have the viewers slow down, recalibrate, really look, and take their time. And, you know, we're all so busy, but these works do require you to attend to them individually, and then, of course, you get so much back when you give them that time. But it's not like this, okay, as an installation, it may hit you initially, but individually, they do require something of the viewer to give to it as well, to make sense as they go around. And, I mean, it is something that's important to you, isn't it, that the way people look needs to kind of slow down a little?
Yeah, I think, you know, I mean, because obviously the works themselves have taken a long time, and I think, you know, for a viewer that's quite obvious. If you're walking into it, you sort of, you know, it's not immediately apparent, but once you just still yourself and have a look and engage with those things, it becomes more apparent, and that you know, that those things have a kind of resonance and a sort of, you know, I mean, you know, I've tried to put a lot of things into my project, and obviously, you know, I'm still kind of working out how it works and what it does and what essentially it's trying to do. In my head, you know, it will be like, kind of, I don't feel like I'm making it for now. I feel like I'm making it for a world in 200 years' time, but what that will be, there's no idea at all, even if we're still going to be here. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, you know, I'm not a doom and gloomster per se, but, you know, given the current state of the world, I'm not overly optimistic either.
I think we have a little bit of time left, so I'm sure I see lots of great artists in the audience, and I would imagine we have some questions. And I see one right there from Aideen Barry. Aideen, do you want to give it a good old holler out there with a question so we can catch that on the film?
More of a reflection and a question. First of all, to applaud Anna on curating a lovely project, but in a city that lost its city status when I was a teenager here, actually, so I think that's been quite clever, this city, but it also speaks louder to works in a way about the cities that are no longer the capitals of their own countries. For example, like Jerusalem has been occupied by Israel and has lost there's an ambiguity around its stocks in Palestine and all of this. And I know that you as artists, a lot of the time, you say you're not political, but the work has these kind of resonances with the state of being. And as Christy just spoke to who the audience is in 200 years' time, I'm really curious about the weight of the work in a world now where, say, Kiev is under attack, where we don't know the fate of our cities with climate apocalypse. 79 years since the bombing of Hiroshima was like that. So I would just love to hear your reflections, as also happy that your work is in a public collection, and Chris, yours hopefully will go to a public collection, hint, hint, those terraces, that, you know, the weight of that work and how it will sit in time around our fate and the future of us.
Thanks, Aideen. I haven't seen this body of work in years, I think possibly 20 or even more years. And walking around it, the thing that just really struck me was looking at the map of Kiev and just thinking, you know, what is there, what isn't there? It's unquantifiable what's happened there, and also maybe some other places. When I did that project, I could not get a map of Kabul at all. You couldn't get one anywhere. I don't think they were being published for various reasons. I think, you know, on Google Earth, maybe a lot of that is blacked out. Now, things have not changed there, and like in 200 years or whatever, Chris, who knows how much things will have changed, you know, how many of those landmarks still exist in some of your drawings. I think that's, you know, I approached this project because I was hearing what was happening in the world but I didn't want to impose any of my political ideas, any politics on it, because I felt it was not about the state or the country. It was about us as humans navigating a place and habitating a place. But there's no doubt, looking at them, we're confronted by those things through the passage of time. It doesn't speak very well of us as people.
I think even since I've sort of finished that project a couple of years ago, obviously, I mean, the one that I sort of bore in mind when I was doing it, because it was kind of obviously changing at the time, was Sana'a in Yemen. And, you know, it's beautiful, beautiful architecture. And I think not long after I finished it, there was a lot of problems. You know, obviously the wall was tearing apart. And I think I remember having a look and seeing views of that city, which has obviously been, you know, changed fundamentally. Obviously Kiev, you know, but those things are kind of ongoing. And I mean, you know, although the work doesn't have a pomp and bombast, and I used that term before, but, you know, like politically, it's absolutely implicit within the idea of the project. You know, kind of what I always think is interesting is sort of what's not there as a capital city. You know, and I mean, I nearly did Scotland during the course of the project, but that kind of petered out. You know, obviously Gaza's not there as a capital. Hopefully at some point all of these things will change. They're absolutely bound to, but how that process will play out, I've obviously, you know, no idea. But I think, you know, the work, I mean, I think certainly my work, although, you know, in some ways it isn't political, but in some ways it absolutely is in every way, and it's absolutely intrinsic to the work. So, I mean, you know, but that depends on your perspective as well as the actual work itself.
Mary Ruth?
Yeah, just what brings up with the cities that we both are looking at, and when you mentioned Italian Calvino as well, so it's relevant for writers, invisible cities, it brought me back to Calvino's 6 Memos for the Next Millennium, and his first essay is on likeness. And I'm kind of reflecting when I'm looking at both your works. I'm just interested to hear what you think about this sort of rumination. Is that I've been thinking a lot about likeness, and I've been looking at it from all different perspectives, really different lenses. The Calvino sense, the sense is that he could have been heavy in a way that is sort of dystopian, I suppose, is one way I'm looking at it. Or he could be light, and he chooses light, and he kind of says, well, weight is not, it's not that it's any worse or better than lightness. But what I see with both of your works is not, it's kind of metaphorically, but it's actually a lightness in how it's given to us, which opens it up in a way that's so much more exciting than if it was perhaps, you know, the names were in the cities or whatever, or if it was more overtly political. And it's that lightness that is something that he must have chosen, like Calvino, he has chosen to be light with his writing, but not that it's less serious. But I don't know if that's, it's a very difficult way to kind of to grasp, but it's just that particular essay of Calvino's is something, I think it was John Hopkins' essays that he wrote the 6 Memos for.
Yeah, I've been having a recent blitz on Calvino, and I absolutely love his writing. Like, I mean, obviously it's deeply serious in every way, but there's a humour and a luminosity to the way that he writes. And yeah, and I love that. I mean, just again, sorry to come back to my own work, but you know, sort of, I love the ridiculousness of it. Like, there were bits in that were just making me laugh out loud as I was completing them. So, yeah, I mean, that's a big compliment to mention Calvin. That's a big fanboy, I'm afraid.
Or do you want to respond?
I'll just quickly respond to Mary Ruth. I haven't read that essay, but when I was approaching this project, I was trying to draw as faintly as I could on the page. That was like a big thing when I'd started, just try and draw really faintly so you could hardly see the lines, and then they would slowly build up and build up. So the denser a place was, the darker it got just from those multitude of very faint lines. So it's interesting. I just thought that you talked about lightness, because that was a big thing about trying to actually do a good drawing, was to start with really, really light lines. But I think there is a real lightness when you walk into the room. You know, these are two really controlled projects. You know, we both, you know, had a, you know, very kind of strict parameters when we started them. And amazingly, when you go into the room, there actually is a real lightness, I think, in the installation of them, and a real open-endedness of them as well, surprisingly.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, all I was going to say is that obviously there's a serious piece of work, but also, like I say, there's a sort of, I don't know, like your own work, Catherine, there's tenderness and fragility and all of those, you know, sort of aspects of like the body and like veins or brains or organic structures on the face of the world. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Organic, like a fingerprint or DNA. Dorothy Smith, an artist who uses pencil and paper and in all her work. Do you have a question for us?
Yeah, it's kind of a question. So it just strikes me that, like, there's a lot of you mentioned of intimacy and fragility, to do with things that represent power and authority, like the subject matter does, and also the source material, and particularly like the analogue maps and the ordnance survey maps, were all about surveying and control, and a lot of time, you know, colonialism and everything. So it's just really interesting that the subject and the source material, that you've turned it on its head by creating this really kind of this thing that really represents or says a lot about humanity and how we live, and to make it personal and intimate and fragile and more real, I think, than the source. So it's just this kind of it's not that beauty, but these two really opposing things.
Okay. Thanks, Dorothy. I think my real feeling is from walking in cities, you know, and the idea that, like, I know cities are mainly planned, there's a lot to do with planning, control, but I like to think in the layers underneath the cities we're in now, the city developed from just people walking from one place to another, and there was a reason to do that, so then that became a track, and that became a path, and then became a road, and then other roads built up. So I like to feel the actual original cities began from people walking from one place to another to communicate with each other.
Yes.
Just a comment, really. Something I found quite helpful vis-a-vis this issue about politics was to make a distinction between the original meaning of polis being the Republican city, the city of citizens, as opposed to politics with the capital P that we all automatically understand, power structures and so on. I have yet to see the exhibition. I just came down this morning, but it strikes me from what you're saying that both your work is calling on both these ways of interpreting politics. You know, that we're inclined to always think politics is the capital P type, but I think it seems to me what your work is getting at also is the smaller P, the polis.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I slightly I don't know. I mean, I'm still unpacking for myself what that work's doing, you know, and I think in as much as I say, you know, sort of like there's no real strategic politics in it. There's obviously an implicit politics in it, and you know, I mean, in some ways, it's because obviously the drawings, they're analog, they do utilise a digital aspect of being involved in the world, but analog is almost like a bit of a cry for freedom, you know, to become disembroiled from all of these things and to kind of step back from, I guess, sort of those structures which are absolutely, you know, integrated in all of our lives in every way. You know, government, you cannot function in relation to government without utilising digital media in some way or form or another at the moment. You know, and it might be, like I was saying, you know, this work, you know, if it still exists in 200 years' time, you know, it's made out of wood. So it's very flammable. That was another issue that I was concerned about over the last 10 years. But anyway, I digress. So I don't know, I kind of think in some ways, you know, although there's a provocation of means, you know, we're saying, right, everyone is equal in some ways, but also there's a kind of like a lament there as well. There's a bit of a kind of, you know, oh, what could we have been if we, you know, well, I don't know. It's, I mean, again, like I say, it's still a work in progress. The kind of, the operation of things in the world is a work in progress. So that's out of my hands.
Any other questions before we, oh, there we go, Eamon.
It's a question for both Kathy and Chris that would do with time and distance. So Kathy, you said it's 20, 25 years since you've seen this all together. And Chris, for you, this may have been the first time you've seen it properly all together.
Yeah.
So that thing about what does the work mean now for you both, in terms of for you coming back and seeing it, Chris, when you see it together for the first time, but also then in terms of what does it mean for your own future practice, the idea of this one piece of work with different components being seen together, and how might you deal with that?
Thanks, Simon. I was quite nervous, actually, coming to see the work again, because it had a big impact when it was made, and then I haven't seen it for years. And, you know, I was thinking, you know, maybe it won't hold up technically. Maybe it's irrelevant to the time. Anyway, I was happy when I saw it again. It's quite strange. There's still elements of, you know, that work has had an effect on my work moving on from then. So it's actually been nice for me to look at it in relation to what I'm doing now and what elements are similar. It was funny when I made them, it never occurred to me the lines that I was drawing look a little bit like net fabric sometimes, and I'm dealing with textiles a bit now, so I was, you know, looking at it from that point of view, which was kind of funny. It wasn't anything I was thinking of at the time. I think, you know, when I made them, I was thinking this is relevant, this is contemporary. I think they stand up as looking contemporary now, but when you delve into the cities, the omissions, the fact that they were made in a pre-internet age, they are a moment of time. I see them like a capsule now.
I think for me, it's obviously a sort of an open question of, you know, kind of like, I finished this project a couple of years ago, so I've been doing other work. I was doing work using oak galling, which is sort of handmade ink that was used to produce the Magna Carta, and obviously, you know, those kind of things. And I've been using gouache to do not very big seascapes. So, but what I liked about that was that they had none of the baggage or the politics of the city pieces, and it was more about, obviously, you know, a lot of my work is to kind of like to do with mind and psychology and those sort of operations, and I sort of think obviously a seascape is a very particular thing, but I love the complexity of it. I love the rhythms, I love the tones, I love, you know, sort of, and I was doing these little gouache works in colour as well. So mainly from a lot of work from photographs that I've taken myself. Some was down at Aberystwyth University, which is down by the seafront, so I took a lot of photographs of there. And then I have people sending me photographs saying, I'm on a ship, do you want some photos? So it was like, yeah. So, but how that's going to progress, I don't know. You know, I mean, for me, this has been an absolutely joyful couple of weeks. You know, obviously meeting Kathy, seeing the work actually in a space, just sort of like even, you know, spending time detached from that and watching people in, you know, sort of like become involved with the work is kind of fascinating, and obviously in some ways is going to inform how I sort of operate in the future, but I don't know to what extent or how that will work, and you know, that's part of the process.
Yeah, I think we've all been very lucky with the experience of putting these two artists together and the having that opportunity to spend time with their work. I think we'll probably wrap up now because we've run out of time, but thank you for your attention, and let us put our hands together to thank Dr. Yvonne Scott, Kathy Prendergast and Chris